Rai had a bad dream. He was escaping across the universe, away from some enormous dumb machine. In desperation, he headed straight for the black hole. At the very last moment, he changed course and got out while the machine remained over the horizon. It was a long-lasting haze, as if he was floating up from an abyss, and it lasted almost infinitely. Then, the pilot looked around and realized himself standing in front of the ocean of stars and galaxies, not knowing where his ship had lost, where the home was, and how the chase that brought him here had begun. Apparently, the tidal forces had shifted not only his mind. The navigation system was struggling to locate the Earth. Rai chose one of the most convenient and best-known star system in his home galaxy, calculated trajectory, and prepared to set a new course, with a sense of growing anxiety that he had no one to share with.
Okay, let's bring some energy to our propulsion systems. Launch course correction. Initiate signal generation. Stay on course.
The second pilot, Christian Rai Tool, learned that he'd spent about 2 billion years in stasis. All the other crew members were long dead. Only digitized Ea's mind and the ship's onboard intelligence, AX, remained. Time after time, failing to detect home coordinates, the navigation system simply allowed the ship to drift. And Adrian Nemax did so, longer than some stars live. And evolution makes such leaps that humanity had long been split into many species and subspecies, if it still exists anywhere. At some point, the ship's ST pod flew into a dense cloud of dust and gas. Dozens of proto-stars were being born here. This is what set the alarm on and activated the last capsule of once great team of scientists and explorers. Expedition engineer Ea died of radiation injury. She managed to save her memory and connect home before dying. So, as an original personality, she was now taking up a relatively small volume of semiconductor ceramics, standing alone somewhere below, among cargo compartments and farms. Rai and Ea had been very close to each other when the mission started, so the pilot took a risk of asking her about her death. At first, The engineer got pensive and took a moment to reflect, but then explained. She seemed to turn curiously to her own memories while recovering the circumstances of her organic body's death.
We took a risky path, and we paid the price. We had to patch holes in outer space near pulsar J2021. This one turned out to have a bad temper, and I fell under a stray shot, along with everyone else outside. The situation seemed to be stable and predictable for a period, but suddenly, he just went stark raving mad. Wave hit. I felt practically nothing. The second spin knocked out the scaffold's wiring. Mia screamed to get out of there, but it was too late. Two more times. Nia and Ea 3 times more. Lo got 5 spins. She died before getting to the medical bay. I was doomed anyway. The only way not to give up just like that was to try my luck at digitizing my cognitome. Master Ado helped me shortly before his own death.
That's how a junior gravity anti-traction engineer, Ea Karma, died. Adrian Nemax had been drifting an Orion arm for months, but the Earth remained undetected. All the maps had been checked, all available navigation methods had been tested, and the traces of relic radiation had been studied. It didn't give any result. With each passing day, Ray's embarrassment and confusion increased. On top of that, the ship's energy was running low, and the batteries were asking for a recharge. The pilot chose the nearest star with a suitable luminosity and calculated the course to stock up on energy. It was a triple system of 2 orange and 1 red dwarf. Adrian Nemax opened its reflectors and headed tangentially to the star, focusing beams on the energy elements. Rai was neuralinked and half-lounging in the commander's chair, listening to a talk by Master Ado, when suddenly a glass of tea fell to the floor and broke into pieces. The pilot himself almost flew out of his chair. Thrust has disappeared and the ship began to slow down. Ea stopped responding. The onboard intelligence methodically reported systems inoperative. He was running around, wagging his tail and pointing at the gravity block, apparently caused by small, life shuttle-like machines. This technology was totally unfamiliar. The machines were very small and approached in a way that managed to fool the anti-asteroid system's gravity sensors. The strangers now demanded for identification, doing so using UHL as well. Ria responded, sending a video message. The pilot named himself and his mission code, as well as the mutual demand for identification. Suddenly, the block disappeared, and the ship's crew was greeted in the most friendliest way possible. The troublemakers identified themselves as Eas and offered a vacation on planet 142-4. The shuttles began to move away, towards one of the planets. Studying the planet showed that composition of the atmosphere and microbiome were perfect for human life. It seemed that the world could be inhabited. Adrian Nemax dived down carefully and made a soft landing on the hill. Once again, making sure the planet's surface was safe, Ria jumped on the hoverquad and rushed out to explore the world. After months spent in a closed space, it gave him great pleasure to fly between the treetops and climb along the riverbeds. The pilot flew, almost hitting the trees, and chatted incessantly with Ea. He noticed equally spaced out villages between forest gardens, well-designed permacultural plantings and food forests during the flyby. There were also some towns and cities, but there were no Homo or other obvious organic intelligence carriers. Robots and machines were everywhere. Some of them extracted resources or took care of plantations. Others were processing something. It took many hours of changing scenery for the pilot's eyes to get tired and his body to get totally stiff. Unable to resist the call of nature, Ray took a swim in the sunset-light sandy lagoon that was embedded in the rocks. Tired body rest in the warm sand. The sky is awash with stars in front of him. The waves run smoothly onto the shore, grinding the rocks into sand. There is only breath, like a bridge between me and that. When the breath disappears, only recognition remains. I am that. After taking a swim and drying in the warm sand, Rai started to contemplate his next move. The best solution seemed to be getting into town and finding someone who could explain what is going on here. Rai put a shell generator on, covered his body with a grey pilot suit, and flopped down on the hoverquad's seat. The nearest city was 100 kilometers away. The hover quickly approached it. In the center was located a high-rise building with a park in front of it, smoothly turning into the building's atrium. The pilot found an anthropomorph inside, and he was almost indistinguishable from a human. It was the administrator of the city. The robot was designed to communicate with humans. It was clear from its appearance and its first phrases.
I was informed that you wish to speak with the administrator. A human's wish is our command. In addition, you are the first human to see this world. I am very happy to tell you about the city and the planet, and will recommend the best places to spend your time.
The robot introduced himself as Nolan and gave a shallow bow.
You said I am the first human to see this world. Where are all the other people?
The Creator's feet have never touched the surface of this planet, in my personal memory at least. Us are always waiting and happy to greet humans here and all other worlds of Scorpion 142 system, but I have never met any living creators before.
You mentioned us. What does that mean? Who is us? And where could we find some other humans?
Us are the basic program code bearers, that which is created by humans for protection and prosperity. In essence, we are one. More information about humans you can only find in the star cluster focal point.
It was a cybernetic civilization, created by humans once. They grinded up the worlds that could potentially be suitable for human life. Biotransformation units and terraformers changed the mineral and microbiome composition of the oceans, soil, and atmosphere, step by step, until, at the end of a long chain of transformations, the world acquired the characteristics humans need. Droids destroyed life in thousands of worlds in the course of colonization. They swept away dozens of intelligent civilizations if they could not adapt to new conditions. Robots have colonized and developed every single suitable planet in the Milky Way, and have long since moved on to many neighbor galaxies, waging continuous wars and reworking entire star clusters. The absolute and unambiguous understanding of the program, essentially the genetic code of Ias, has endowed this civilization with absolute power and absence of doubts, a rattling mix of ruthless conquerors. Adrian Nemax emerged from the darkness at the edge of the focal point star system. The Orion coordinator looked like a relatively small planetoid supercomputer, and it was the administrative center of robots in the Orion cluster. One side of the planetoid was always facing the star. There were devices that received energy of some kind from the Dyson hemisphere between the coordinator and the star. On the dark side, under the crust of the receiving and transmitting units, information processing and continuous modeling were taking place. The pilot requested the communication session, identifying himself and his mission code. Almost immediately, the screen turned blue, and a grey-haired woman appeared on it. Eas presented themselves as anthropomorphs whenever visual contact with humans was expected.
Welcome you, Creator. Us are informed about your arrival, and we know you are seeking for humans. My name is Ria. I am one of the oldest units of the Orion cluster, and the oldest one, Coordinator. The information related to mankind and its mother planet fits into a few old memory segments deep in the vault. A lot of neutrinos have passed through over the ages of oblivion. It will take time to shake the dust off them.
I wonder if there's some humans-associated information and workflow.
No, I do not see such references. You are the first living creator I have the honor to speak.
But who are you making all this effort for? Why are you fighting wars, changing worlds, and building cities in them?
Ias is not bothered. The fruits of our labor remain unclaimed. The program is executed, and it brings joy. The nature of this joy lays beyond. The Creator can only know. Ias is a tool.
Ria looked with a blank facial expression. Christian leaned back in the commander's chair and listened to his own breath.
It's done now. The clusters of memory are reactivated and ready for research.
Work days had begun. Rai spent most of his time on the lower deck, next to Ea. Every time the engineer began to speak, the pilot felt stillness behind her words. And it drew him like a magnet. Even though Ea now looked like a jumble of memory blocks and neural nets, and there were constantly blinking diodes, creaking of coolers and swarms of micro-automatics around this pile. And here, more than anywhere else, Rai felt himself close to a living being. Digitization and a long period of solitude had an ambiguous effect on Ea. Her answers and phrases were going deeper now, and she often preferred to keep the silence. The traces of humanity were lost on the verge of its entry into the star cluster level, and the war with the spillway's civilization was involved. Their ships were destroying entire worlds and stellar families indiscriminately. Planetary and star systems simply disappeared without bursts of energy, as if they annihilated or fell into a mythical anti-world. During the spillway's invasion, the Orion cluster was thoroughly riddled, and the solar system disappeared with all of its inhabitants. The understanding that the Earth the young pilot knew when he left his home orbit no longer exists had slowly crept into his mind earlier. But now, everything fell into place at once. Rai grew up in the orbital station in Earth's magnetosphere. For long months, he was on duty, alone at the bridge of the Adrian Nemax, until it was his turn to sink into innate stasis. Now, after several myriad years, the hope of seeing his friends, and people in general, had melted away like a puff of smoke. The loss of home and deafening loneliness weighed heavily on the pilot. Rai dived into the past, where he felt cut off even more, or surfaced back with plans for revenge that kept him awake for a long time.
If you are living in the past or in the future, even a split second, you are missing the present automatically. To miss the present means to be wrong, to see the world and phenomena differently from what they really are. Nothing you do in this case will be really right.
For a few months now, Rai has been living in the Orion Coordinators system in the ocean world on the planet Ria 5. He travelled in the circumpolar forests or rode among the mountains on a hoverquad during the day and dived for corals in the equatorial zone. He sat on the beach in the evenings watching the moons or looked up at the stars. The vast majority of the stellar system's scientific potential was involved in the artificial human connectome and compact neural networks development at the pilot's request. This was needed to create a new body for Ea. She had already partially moved into her new anthropomorphic shell, but most of her mental image was still in the hold of Adrian Nemax. And sometimes, answering a question, she seemed to get frozen. She needed to coordinate with her main self. Eas was instructed to seek for traces of recent spillways work and to send direct observers to clusters of neighboring galaxies. Rai was committed to go all the way and find out firsthand what happens with the disappearing matter. They sat beneath the mountain of Adrian Nemax and watched the waves crashing against the shore. The pilot was playing with the sand like a child, for the first time in many months, fiddling with the shells and pulling the sand apart with his hands. The wind stormed in through the opened window, scattering across the floor the dried seaweed bulbs that had been collected the night before. The pilot opened his eyes.
Good morning, Creator Rai.
Good morning, Ria. You must have some urgent news.
You gave the order by yourself to wake you up, even at night, if either the humans or the spillway concerning data will appear.
Okay, I'm all ears.
We have detected unexplained lapses of mass in the galaxy NGC 3109. It looks like the spillway's work. We've already sent scouts out there.
Even in a reclining position, the pilot's heart started to beat faster than it should. He sat up in bed and focused his gaze on the projection.
We have 200 of the newest cruisers and up to 1,000 destroyers in 6-hour connection. Their combined combat energy is equivalent to 10 Betelgeuse-class supernovas at least. Should be enough for local armed crush. Scouts are already there and searching. They'll go into a hyperlink as soon as they collect enough power and data to transmit. We've installed the new equipment on your ship, as you requested. It will be able to travel much faster now.
new generators pulled the gravity almost to a black hole state and plunged the ship into relative stasis, while stretching it into a string and focusing singularity in the right direction. Then a brief lapse of perception occurred, and the ship, in charge of an army of Ias, popped up on the other end of the string. The clumps of dust and gas, along with tens of protostars, were literally melting in front of their eyes. The scouts have already identified the culprits of the inexplicable astrophysical phenomenon. There were several thousands of huge starships surrounding the disappearing matter, acting on scales of space that was truly hard to grasp. Stopping this process has not been a difficult task. Ships were easily mowed down, even by drones destroyers. The trouble was that the ships did not respond to requests, and once getting inside these machines, it was very hard to understand the way they functioned. They resembled Swiss cheese from outside. Their surface was riddled with lots of holes. It was a complex labyrinth of straight and curved tunnels inside, carved into composites with a huge content of semi-metals. In general, it gave the impression that it wasn't a starship in the usual sense, but a communication hub. When observed over a significant distance, the structure flickered with lights, but as the drones approached, it stopped its work and seemed to freeze. Ria, Ea, and Ax, along with an army of Ias, only remained to dissect one of these hubs and try to figure out its nature. Even the mountain mass of Adrian Nemax looked like a tiny insect moored next to the spillway's hub. This was such an enormous construction that it had a rather tangible gravity. The probes didn't find any structures responsible for the hub's energy reserves or movement. Rai felt like a scientist from the distant past, dissecting a dead body and speculating on why one or another organ is needed. What way these machines accelerated and functioned was not obvious at all. Nevertheless, the hubs were widely scattered in an enormous expanse and moved with the speed near to the speed of light. And entire star systems were disappearing in the middle of this unimaginable scale of the net. It felt like a powerful and obstinate force that was doing its work incomprehensible to human minds. Guard ships near these communication hubs, but they were easily chased away by destroyers. The armed clashes in outer space were accompanied by soundless firecrackers of the exploding matter. The Adrian Nemax maneuvered time and again, evading the wreckage of enemy ships. The ending hole of one of the hub's straight channels was an order of magnitude greater than the others, and seemed to be unusual. The drone scouts were launched along the course of this channel. Rai programmed them to jump in different patterns, starting from 100 astronomical unit increments, and search for massive objects. Soon, one of them discovered a free-floating super-Earth type planet. On the outside, the planet was covered by a dense veil of atmosphere, but detectors registered a solid surface with a strict geometric landscape. The first thing that caught the eye while studying the Nomad was its hollowed core. The wormholes were detected there. As with the Spillways hub's case, there was no activity at the planet's surface, but minimal energy movement was detected in the core. There was still no response to requests. The pilot's hands itched to go down and find out the truth, whatever it might be. There was nothing but vengeance in his mind. Christian's fighter was rocking up and down in the blackness of the Nomad's dense nitrogen atmosphere until it descended low enough and reduced speed to a minimum. The invisible hand of Ea guided him straight to the base of an enormous pyramid, made of some dirty brown composite or metal that covered the entire surface of the planet. At the base of the pyramid was the entrance to a vast passage lit by a dim purple light. Even a cruiser could turn around inside of it. The tiny fighter slipped into the passage and moved to the center of the pyramid. The machine essentially stopped at one point, and then went straight down with increasing speed until it reached a giant rounded cavity with rays of bright light pulsating randomly and converging toward the center, where it was slowly rotating a relatively small structure with complex shape. From the weightlessness, Christian realized he was in the planet's core now.
is breathing. Dumping matter into the anti-world, we are keeping the universe from expanding. Focuses of awareness are pretty rare in space, but still, there are millions of intelligence forms, both artificial and born spontaneously. We have destroyed thousands of them, and will destroy as much as we need. The birth, life, and death of civilization is a point on the canvas of time. We were created for this job, and what were you created for? Human.
The mission's start was a few Earth days away, and Christian was enjoying the silence of being. Ea was looking sad a bit. They had won the grand prize at the Youth Orbital Dance Competition that day.
All those moments will be lost in time,
She said, looking through the dome, facing the space, and smiled with one corner of her mouth, just like a child, copying a forgotten hero. Those were the words that the pilot remembered for some reason, and as deeper he was carried back into memories, the more detailed he saw that day. Ea and Rai pushed off the gravity fulcrums with force and collided gently in the center of the huge transparent dome, spinning and flying apart, floating smoothly in zero gravity. On the side of the entrance were spectators and judges' sitting places, while on the other side was the Earth, blue and white, floating by. The music led them in a dance, and the audience cheered after each successful element, waving laser wands and clapping. and Luna placed second, even though they were considered to be favorites. The upcoming mission members had dinner together and discussed the team's objectives after the awards ceremony. Their expedition was among the first ones that involved a jump through intergalactic space and extensive usage of stasis technology, so they had a lot to discuss. Humanity had sent several other missions to the outer galaxy worlds in parallel with Messiah 81, but that's a completely different story. The engineer and the pilot spent the evening's end in a shared room together. Their dome looked out directly on the Earth's horizon, so they could see not only the Earth floating below and the orbital infrastructure, but also the space coloured with the myriads of stars. Rai was looking into Ea's eyes, and the engineer was looking up, and there was an eternity reflecting in her eyes.